Dr. Roberts, thanks for coming back on to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Yes, we're glad to be with you, Mike.
I want to start off with your time in Washington. You were in the Treasury Department, spent a lot of time up there. Are you seeing from your experience to what you're following today, them trying to pass a bill, the great, I keep getting it wrong, the big beautiful bill, and doesn't seem like things are getting accomplished. Are you seeing any similarities from your time there, or differences, or what?
Well, there's actually a huge difference. And of course, there's similarities because um, budget fights are always about where they're going to spend the money. It's not really about how much money they're going to spend, but where are they going to spend it? And the Democrats always had their favorite places to spend it, and the Republicans had their favorite places. And so a fight over an appropriation bill, a spending bill, was really about uh, who whose purse we're going to water, where are we going to spend the money. So that's still, I think, the same. Um, but what's fundamentally different is that in recent years, you could kind of see it coming gradually, but all of a sudden it was here. I think it just sort of um, popped up full-fledged in the Obama regime and, of course, the Biden regime. And what we have seen is the Democrats became an ideological party. We had never had ideological parties. Both parties were very pragmatic. They had preferences about where they spent the money, but they weren't ideological. They weren't following some kind of ideological agenda. But now the Democrats are extremely ideological. Um, all of this DEI movement, where they refuse to hire white people, they refuse to promote white people. I mean, we had, for example, in Biden's administration, I don't think there was a single heterosexual white male in any position of power. And this has taken over the civil service. I suppose you saw a few days ago the interview Tucker Carlson did with the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Civil Rights Division uh, in um, in Trump's administration, and she said that she came in and the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice uh, represented institutionalized racism against white people. She says there were 400 attorneys under me and 200 staff. And when I told them that we were going to enforce the laws the way they are written, and we're going to stop using them as weapons against white people and Christians, she said they formed struggle groups. They formed what she called it, aggrieved sessions. They formed crying sessions. And Tucker said, "What do you mean crying sessions?" She says, they would gather together in room and cry. She said 30, 40, 50-year-old white men crying because I was stopping them from using law to persecute white people. And she said um, that they had just recently half of them, 200 Justice Department attorneys, formed into a phalanx, resigned in group, and marched out of the Justice Department because they absolutely refused to be fair in the application of law. Their position was they had to discriminate against white people to make up for past discrimination against blacks. And she said they called it bringing social justice to white people. So that's the sort of situation where you show, where it shows that ideology is extremely entrenched, not just in the Democratic Party, but within the civil service. And why is that? Because most of the people who go in the civil service are Democrats. They're people who believe in government, or they wouldn't be there. So if you look at all the polling data, and this is available, so much of it, it turns out that like 95% of United States civil service are registered Democrats. So the ideology is not just in the appointed officials. You know, I think there are, how many? 300 or 400 top people appointed in the federal government. It's not just at the bosses, it's actually in the staffs, it's in the civil service. There are 3 million of them. There are 3 million of them, and 95% of them are ideological Democrats. And they're committed to this DEI stuff, this woke stuff. And they see it as a transformation of American society. They're in there to transform the society, not to serve the president. So this was not true when, when was it? I was in Washington, let's see, 10, 20, 30, 45 years ago, 40 to 45 years ago, I was in the Treasury. I was in Washington in many other high aspects, including that presidential secret committee. We had subpoena power on the CIA. They had to show us their papers concluding that it would be a mistake for Reagan to try to end the Cold War by pressuring the Soviets with an arms race. But there was no ideology. The CIA was trying to hold on to its enemy, which it needed for its budget, its power. But today, it's very ideological. You have to remember, we may have talked about it, that in the Biden Defense Department, the Secretary of Defense announced that there would be no promotions for white males in the Army until they had promoted the DEI group. So the ideology is so strong, it trumps the 14th Amendment, which requires equal treatment under the law. Well, that's been set aside now ever since the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And people don't know this, but this 1964 Civil Rights Act strictly prohibits affirmative action, strictly prohibits it. But the EEOC implemented racial quotas in employment, promotion, and university admission. And we've had them now for 60 years. And no one did anything about it. Well, over that time, the whole thing got more and more ideological, and we've had more and more uh, racism theory developments, aversive racism. All whites are racist, even though they don't know they are. We have the critical race theory they teach the kids in public school. And it's now gotten where white people are second-class citizens under the law. So that's just one example of the uh, evolution of a pragmatic political party that had its favored people to spend money on or for, and one that has become an ideological that weaponizes law, that weaponizes news in order to discredit opponents, discredit society, and transform the society into a multicultural Tower of Babel, which is what we are now. And if you look at all the time during which the Biden regime did not enforce the borders, we had millions of people coming in illegally, and the courts did nothing whatsoever. But now that Trump wants to send some of them out, bang, stopped. You're not allowed to do that. Well, so we can see this DEI, what they call it, diverse equity inclusion. This ideology is now in the judiciary. It's quite all right for people to walk in the country illegally and for California to hire them as police officers and for them to claim all the rights of citizenship. That's quite right. So what does it mean to be a citizen? Well, we don't raise that question. But no, it's not all right to deport an illegal entrant. And we see that now. I don't know how many of these Democrat judges have made that ruling. So that's the difference. And the Republicans are not an ideological party, and they don't understand these kinds of fights, and they don't know what to do.
Go ahead. Anyone? This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike. I'm also curious, in a comparison standpoint, from budgetary back when you were there to now, because, and correct me here, nobody wants to cut anything out of their budget today. No one's going to say, and they're not going to do what really needs to be done in order to make progress. Was it like that then?
Yeah, pretty much, because if you're going to cut the budget, then which side is the cut going to be on? The Republicans don't want them on their side because they're using the budget to reward their supporters, and the Democrats don't want the cuts on their side because they're using the budget to reward their supporters or their, electorates. And so cutting the budget means somebody's not going to be able to reward their supporters. So that's always been a problem. And also, um, if you propose tax rate reduction like Reagan did, I wrote that bill. Then the question comes up, how do you pay for the tax cut? What are you going to cut? in spending to pay for the tax cut. And for both parties, the way they see it, the tax cut benefits ordinary people, but the spending benefits their specific constituents, the people who actually support them. All right. So the Democrats were always very heavy on welfare spending because they were the party of the working class. And the Republicans were always in favor of more projects that would result in contracts for big business because that was their constituency. So when it would come up, okay, we want to cut the tax rates because inflation has pushed everybody in higher brackets. See, the tax, until Reagan, the tax rates were not indexed for inflation. So every year, if your income rose with inflation, you rose into higher tax brackets. And, John F. Kennedy had addressed that problem in the early 60s. And now it's the 80s. It needs to be addressed. And so the question is, well, we're talking about rewarding everybody, but it'll come at the expense of our favored groups. And so they don't like to cut taxes. And this is one of the reasons it was so hard to get Reagan's bill out of his administration, because the Republicans said, well, we can't cut defense. There's the Soviet Union, there's China, and the commies will take over, and what are we going to cut? And so the issue was not, how do we keep people from being inflated into higher tax brackets so that their real income shrinks year by year. Oh, that's not the problem. The problem is, gosh, how we have to pay for it by cutting something, and that hurts us, our constituencies. So that was always there. And also something that's always there and still is there, and David Stockman, who was the budget director in the Reagan first term, he epitomizes it. And the notion is that we are being destroyed by the national debt. And how can we pay it? And and I've heard this all my life. It is the main element of Republican economic thinking, that the deficits will bury us and we can't pay them. And how can we finance so many trillions? And you see, it's amazing to me. And you get the same nonsense from the financial press. So I've been listening to it all my life. And no one has ever understood that there's no trouble whatsoever in financing our debt. It doesn't matter how big the debt is. Why is there no trouble? Because the dollar is the world reserve currency. When American debt goes up, it means the world currency goes up. What is this currency's role? It is the reserves of all the world's central banks. So when American debt rises, so does the reserves of all the central banks in the world. And they're happy. They got more reserves. They can lend more. There's never been any problem. If you're the reserve currency, you have no problem financing your debt as long as you're the reserve currency. And this has never dawned on the Federal Reserve vast majority of government officials. It's never dawned on Republicans or Democrats. It's never dawned on the media. It's never dawned on the financial media. They don't comprehend it. If our debt goes up, so goes up the reserves of the world banking system. The banking system's happy. So financing the debt has been a zero problem. It becomes a problem, Mike, when you weaponize the reserve currency, which is what the idiots in Washington have been doing with sanctions. When you start weaponizing the reserve currency, people say, hey, look, they stole $300 billion of the Russians' bank reserves. Why? Because they were holding them in dollars. How do they hold the dollars? They hold U.S. Treasury bonds. And so the U.S. just froze it. So we're not going to let you have your reserves. We're not going to pay you the interest on your reserves. We're not going to, you can't have it. You can't use it for your central bank's reserves. And we put sanctions on Iran and on Venezuela and on just about anybody now. We threaten everybody with sanctions. And so everybody says, well, what the hell is this? It's not safe to hold your reserves in U.S. Treasury bonds. If you do the slightest thing that they don't like in Washington, whoop, there go your reserves. So that's what the danger is. It's not the size of the debt. It's the sanctions and the increase in the application of sanctions to more and more countries. And that will kill the dollar as the reserve currency. And then we can't finance the debt. But first, they have to kill the dollar. They're working on it. The only reason there is BRICS is because of sanctions. Well, BRICS is busy at work coming up with an alternative international currency. They wouldn't be doing that except for the sanctions that we place. So we're cutting our own throat. It's clear as day. What I'm saying is not arguable. It's not an opinion. And it cannot be argued with. It's the basic facts. And they don't know it. And they take these stupid risks. Oh, we've got so much power, we'll put sanctions. And that's what we're doing. People are saying, oh, I think I'd rather hold gold than dollars. Gold won't pay dividends, so interest like the treasury bonds, but it's been going up. But the Americans can't seize it. And the countries that have gold and have left it in the United States at the Federal Reserve for safekeeping are now trying to get it. They want it home. Why? Because Germany tried to get their gold a few years ago. We wouldn't give it to them. We didn't have it. So you can see what the real situation is. So first of all, when they talk about the budget in terms of debt, they have the foggiest idea what they're talking about. None. Zero. It has no relationship to anything real. And the real reason they don't cut anything is that it cuts their payouts to their constituencies. So traditionally, the Republicans were against welfare because they wanted to cut welfare. And the Democrats were against the military because they wanted to cut the military so they could keep the welfare. And the Republicans wanted to cut the welfare so they could keep the military. And that's what the fight was about. And That will always be part of the fight.
How close are we to losing the reserve currency status? Is that something that's a year away, 20 years away, or no idea?
No idea. You see, people are accustomed to the dollar being the reserve currency. It's what they know. They're used to it. It's comfortable as long as the sanctions don't come on you. The minute the sanctions come on you, you realize I made a terrible mistake. They've got my reserves. I can't get them. Well, if we keep using sanctions, and I see Trump is threatening more sanctions on Russia. Not that they mean anything to Russia at this stage, because we've already stolen their treasury bonds. You don't have to pay off treasury bonds you steal from people. You see? And so, and it also depends on whether BRICS has cohesion enough and whether they trust each other enough to come up with a reserve currency. For example, is it going to be a country's reserve currency again, like the United States currency was the reserve currency? If so, which member of BRICS is going to have that power? It's going to be the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, who? So that'll be a fight. Or they'll say, well, we're going to include everybody's currency. It'll be a basket, and everybody will. Working all that out can take a long time, even if they feel threatened by the United States sanctions. There wouldn't be BRICS except because of the sanctions, because the purpose of BRICS is to evade the sanctions and to get another currency to use as a settlement for international trade imbalances. And they don't need that if the dollar isn't weaponized. So if one day somebody explained it to Trump, he understood it, and he called off the sanctions, the dollar would be strong again, and that would be over with. If they keep using it as a bully tactic and it keeps being expanded, the dollar will eventually not be the world reserve currency. Indeed, the percentage of international trade that's settled in dollar transactions has shrunk. It's gotten smaller. And the Saudis even said that they now accept payment for oil in other currencies. Well, until recently, if you wanted oil, you couldn't buy it unless you had dollars. The Saudis didn't sell oil in anything but dollars. So that supported the dollar. Well, now they said we'll take other currencies. So that weakens the dollar. And another thing, let me add this. American debt is in dollars. We don't owe anybody anything in won or rubles or euros or any. We owe them in dollars, so we have no problem paying. We just print the dollars. We can redeem hundreds of trillions of debt just by printing the money, buying bonds. So you can always pay the debt. But if you're the reserve currency, you don't need to pay the debt. It's the reserves of the world's banking system. And for commerce to grow over time, the central banks need more reserves. So the American debt, really, if you're the reserve currency, your debt has to grow, or the reserves of the banking system doesn't grow. And then the world economy stops. There's no money to finance anymore things. And that's the simple fact. And if I tell Republicans that, they've heard all their life, the deficit, the deficit, the deficit, they can't understand what I'm saying. They think I'm crazy. It makes no sense to them. Well, I can't go in debt forever. How can the government? Easy. You don't have a reserve currency, the government does. I gave up long ago trying to explain it to them. It's just can't. It's beyond their comprehension. It's not anything they can comprehend. And so it's funny, we live in a situation where all kinds of things are happening and everybody's idea of it's totally wrong. I can't right now, Mike, I couldn't tell you one thing that's in the news or has been in 20 years that they have the slightest idea about. All their narratives are nonsensical. They don't make sense. None of them make any sense. But they're the narrative, and you can't challenge the narrative. You get censored. And so you can't teach them. They're stuck in the narratives.
And people don't want to hear it, right? They want to be, they'd rather be stuck in their narratives than to.
Yeah. Most what people I've noticed, see, I've had many careers, and one of them was in journalism and as a writer and as a scholar. It's true even in academic scholarship. People want to hear what they want to hear. So if scholars have an interpretation of X, Y, and Z, and they're happy with it, and you come along and say, well, it's really not right. Here's what's going on. You go away. You're going to depreciate all of our human capital. We've spent years learning this, and here you are coming to tell us it's wrong. Go away. So it's not just ordinary people. Scholarship's the same. Trying to get a new idea across in scholarship is very difficult. I mean, we tried to explain supply side economics to people. They wouldn't have it. Then what are you talking about? We don't want to hear it. We're happy with our explanations. We know how it works, and we don't want to have to go learn something else. And go away.
What are your thoughts on? No, we'll shift over to Russia here. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin and certain people are swearing by it? Or curious what your.
It makes no sense to me. I don't know anything about it, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Um, it, the notion that somebody can create a private money. Um, I mean, all the government has to do is create digital money, and then all these things are outlawed. I mean, they're counterfeiters. The minute the Federal Reserve comes up with digital money, which I think they want to do because it gives government complete total control over everybody. The minute there's a official digital money, that's all Bitcoin is, then Bitcoin and all the others are counterfeits. It's just like today the government makes the cash, the banknotes, and you go make one, it's counterfeit. They put you in prison. And the same thing will happen to Bitcoin and all of those. So it makes no sense. And why is there any value in it? They claim, oh, it's limited. Well, but it didn't because they can mine it. Why is it superior to gold? It's not. So I think it's a speculative thing now. It's probably manipulated because, they drive it way up and then it crashes. They make money both ways. So I think it's just a manipulated thing that exists because there's no official digital money. And the minute it is, all of that digital money, private digital money, is counterfeit. And it'll be treated just like if you or I go start printing $100 bills.
But I've had Bitcoin people on here, and even people in my personal life that swear by they've been in it for 10 plus years, and their response always to me is, okay, it's decentralized. It is a decentralized currency or decentralized Bitcoin. I'm maybe saying that wrong. Decentralized, not currency. Is it? I don't know if it's considered currency, but
It's babble babble. They don't know what they're saying.
But my question is that I had with another conversation I had with somebody who brought up an interesting point. If the government wants to come in and centralize something, and I think back to the Napster days, I said this to a young person, they had no idea what Napster. Remember Napster was releasing all that music for free. And like all these artists were upset because their albums were getting sent out to the internet and you could download it and share it and didn't pay for it. Well,
That's right.
what did they come in? Apple and Spotify came in and created streaming services, and everybody went to it. And Napster went away, and then you have pop up similar, but they died off. I feel like it's the same with this. How can they, if they want to centralize it, the governments across the world, they're going to be able to do that.
Sure. Sure they will. I think given the rate at which the Western world is descending into tyranny, digital money is in our near future because it gives total control. The government has total control. Um, it's like it's like being the reserve currency. We can cut off people's access to our treasury bonds. We can just say you're sanctioned, so we don't have to pay you interest on the bonds. We don't have to let you have them. You can't sell them. You've just lost. You've lost them. So it's not Bitcoin is not anything real. And they said, oh, the internet's going to be wonderful. We've now decentralized information. We're finally free. Well, look how long that lasted. Censorship everywhere, everywhere. Social media censored. And when Elon Musk buys Twitter to free it up, they try to destroy him for providing free speech. So yes, look, Think of Bitcoin and all of its rise as like the tulip mania, the Holland tulip mania in the 1600s, where our tulip bulb would be going for the price of a mansion. Well, no doubt, a lot of people made money if they bought low and sold high. A lot of people went totally broke. And that's my view of Bitcoin. It's it's something for gamblers who are willing to take all the risk of speculation. And sometimes they come out and sometimes they don't. And I think it's all manipulated. It's easy to manipulate things, and particularly when they're not regulated. One of the reasons for the SEC and all of that was to stop all the stock manipulations. A lot of people made fortunes just by stock manipulations. And so, yeah, and you may remember what was the total derivative disaster? Was that 2008?
Yes. Credit default swaps and
Yeah, well, you see, they wouldn't let the Commodity Futures Trading uh, Authority regulate the derivatives. And the woman her name was Brooksley Bourne. Brooksley Bourne. She said, "Look, this is going to blow up. Don't you see what's happening?" And the Alan Greenspan, the Federal Reserve Chairman, the Secretary of the Treasury, I think it was that guy from Harvard. He was president of Harvard until the feminists threw him out. And and the chairman of the SEC, they went to Congress and said, "Stop this dangerous woman. She's going to cause a collapse by regulating." And Congress wouldn't let her do a job, and she wasn't able to regulate the derivatives. And poof! Well, how many Wall Street firms did we lose? We lost what? Shearson, um, Bear Stearns, or Lehman Brothers. We lost Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, the huge insurance company, AIG. It was just massive wipeout from people doing things. They had no idea what was going on. And all the books written later showed that they didn't realize the people doing these things, that they were cutting their own throat. They were caught up in speculation, and it worked yesterday, it'll work today, it'll work tomorrow. And then tomorrow came and it didn't work. And that's my view of Bitcoin.
And nobody went to jail for all that in 2008 either.
No, that's right. That's right. You can't put the establishment in jail. The people who go to jail are the little people, usually the innocent ones. The January 6th protesters, they went to jail for protesting a stolen election. And who put them in jail? The anti-white Department of Justice. Nobody put the blacks who protested and burnt down all the cities in jail. So when law is weaponized, information is weaponized, the people don't have a chance because they don't know what's going on. Their leaders don't know what's going on. And people want to hear what they already know. It makes them comfortable. They don't want to hear something they don't know. They have to go learn about and haven't been indoctrinated to believe. People are happy with their indoctrinations. It defines the viewpoint, the world. It defines their understanding. And when you start messing up with that, and they start getting lost and they don't like it. And as I said, it's true also for scholarship. Scholars are happy in their paradigms, and you come along and say there's something wrong in your paradigm. Look, it's just go away. It's not the way to get promoted. So I've seen it in academia. I shook up some academic fields. I've seen it. They don't like it. I've seen it in government, from the administration side, from the congressional staff side, from the agency side. I've seen it in journalism. It's comfort overrules comfort. People are comfortable hearing what they believe and already know. And I think it'll continue like that. And the danger is, Mike, is that when one of the political parties is ideological and the other can't catch on, the other's going to lose. Wherever there's been a strong ideological force, it's carried today. Look, the Bolsheviks in Russia, Mao Zedong in China, wherever there's a strong movement, it carries, because the others, they haven't got a strong movement.
What are your thoughts on Trump so far since he's returned to office?
I think he came in with good intentions to do what he said. I don't know if he understood how the judiciary was going to do everything possible to stop it and block it. I don't know if he understood that, but I think he's aware of it now. I think after he came in and saw that this was a more difficult task than he thought, that uh, probably the establishment has spoken to him. They've probably explained to him how he can be successful with their help. Um, and I think the way he's looking at the world has changed. I think he feels maybe he's blocked at home, but he can make us great again abroad. And I think the whole purpose of the negotiations in Ukraine, from Trump's standpoint, is for them to fail because he wants to pull the US out of it and focus on China because the policymakers say that China is the more dangerous and more powerful enemy of America, and the Russians are a weaker one, and that war can be turned over to the Europeans. And we see the Europeans announced this week that they're taking all limits of weapons supplied to Ukraine and all limits of the range of weapons supplied to Ukraine. And Trump has said now a half a dozen times that he thinks he just has to walk away from it. So I think that we could see uh, a shift in America's attention from Russia to uh, the Asian Pacific area, to China. They see China as a more formidable opponent, and that our influence in that part of the world is shrinking and being pushed aside, and we've got to get over there and do something. So that's one thing. I think that Trump's initial uh, inclination to attack Iran for Israel, because he's done everything for Israel. His initial inclination to attack Iran, I think, has given way to a broader view. You may have noticed his recent press conference at the White House with NetNun. Trump said Gaza is an American possession. We're going to develop it. It's going to be the anchor for the American neo-colonial empire in the Middle East. I think this empire has been in the works for some time. If you notice the size of the embassy in Damascus, the size of the American embassy, the size of the American embassy they're building in Beirut, these are the two largest embassies in the world. And there's no need for embassies of that size to deal with affairs in Iraq and in Lebanon. These, I think, have to be understood as command and control centers for the American neo-colonial empire in the Middle East. His recent talks with the Saudis, what were they about? In my opinion, he was telling the Saudis, look, you're the only remaining Arab country. We destroyed Libya, we destroyed Iraq, we destroyed Syria. You're the only remaining. The Iranians are Persian. The Egyptians are Egyptian. You're the last, and you don't want to be destroyed, do you? Why don't you come into business as our junior partner in our empire? We're not going to take all the profits home like the French, the British did. We're going to leave them and share them out. And we're going to make the Middle East rich. And you may have heard him talking about the beautiful Arab people are going to be so thankful. We're going to make them all rich. And I think he wants to pull the Iranians in on this. He wants to say, you know, what is the point of all of this? Let's come into business with us. We're going to remake the Middle East. And when the media at the joint press conference turned to Netanyahu and said, well, Netanyahu, what do you think? Trump just said Gaza is an American possession. What's happened to Greater Israel? It's been replaced by the American neo-colonial empire. And Netanyahu said, well, it's, it's probably a good idea what Trump's come up with. We'll see how this works out. Sounds like it might be a good idea. So if you want to look at it like that, you can see a huge difference in how Trump's approaching the world. And of course, the test will come. Now, Netanyahu knows he can't get on the wrong side of Trump because Israel ain't going to exist if we abandon them. And he may have just be making nice all the time, thinking, I'll pull off a false flag event that will force the U.S. into a war with Iran. And that could happen. And so Netanyahu may say, I'm going to block this American empire business and have Greater Israel, and I'm going to do that by another false flag event in which I'm a master, and we'll have Trump at war whether he wants to be or not. And it really won't even matter if Trump knows it's false flag because the media won't treat it as one, and he'll have to go along with it even if he sees through it. So that could upset the American neo-colonial empire. Now, you see, Mike, if you look carefully at statements that Trump officials have made, they fit that. It was the Secretary of State who recently told a Senate committee, he was testifying in a Senate committee, that America has to sequence its conflicts with Russia and China. We're not strong enough to have a conflict with them at the same time. And China is the strongest, and so we've got to get out of the conflict with Russia so we can focus on China. He says this in a Senate hearing. It's on my site. It's available. This is not an opinion. This is what the Secretary of State said. It's posted. It's on my site. We have seen also talk about. In fact, Trump's been talking about developing Gaza for some time, and we see the talk keeps getting bigger. It's not just going to be Gaza. It's going to be the entire Arab Middle East. And the Saudis are going to be partners, or at least they've been advised that would be the way for them to be protected because they're the last Arab state. And not long ago, an Israeli government minister said, well, you know, Greater Israel is now bigger than it used to be. It includes half of Saudi Arabia. Well, so Saudi Arabia is saying, well, now what do we want? Do we want the Jews claiming half of us? They'll use the Americans again, just like they used them against Gaddafi, against Assad, against Saddam Hussein. They'll use them against us. Or if we accept Trump's deal, we won't be destroyed. So now you might think this is all wild speculation. It may be, but there's a lot of circumstantial and actual evidence for it. So we could see a completely different turn in events. Trump at home, according to the courts so far, cannot deport a single person unless he can prove that person is not going to be subject to torture somewhere. Well, how are you going to do that for millions of people? So the way I see it, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 immigrant invaders will be deported. That has been blocked by the courts. Now, the Supreme Court so far has not sided with Trump on this issue. Maybe they'll come around to it, but the vote has been 7-2, 7-2. The two, the two who vote for Trump are Clarence Thomas and Alito. So not even the Republican majority votes for Trump. Well, why should they? Because now the judiciary has an opportunity to increase its power relative to the executive branch. We're watching the judiciary say, hey, he's not really the president. We are. We decide what the president can do, not him. We decide, and he can't do anything we don't approve of. So we're now seeing the judiciary as one of the branches of power seeing opportunity to become much stronger. It's setting itself up as the arbiter of what the president is allowed to do. So he can't really exercise his executive powers unless they approve of it. So this is another transformation. Now, none of these things were expected by MAGA Americans. No one can ever know the unintended consequences that are set in motion anytime any change, no matter how little or how big, is set in place. There are going to be unintended consequences. And I've shown you some. One, it may be the American neocolonial empire replaces Greater Israel. It may be the judiciary becomes more powerful relative to the executive branch. This may be the outcome. Or it may be the executive branch, out of desperation to keep its power, finds some way to shut down the judiciary or to ignore it. There have been presidents who've ignored it. It's difficult for Trump because the Rhino Republicans don't really support him. And if they can make a case that Trump's not obeying the judges, all the Rhino Republicans will vote with the Democrats to impeach him and convict him. And then they'll prosecute him and his government. So these are all the things that are real. These are the real possibilities. There's not going to be some kind of a peace agreement in Ukraine or any of the other things in the narratives. So that's my view of it at this time, Mike. And to 99% of people who hear me say this, it'll sound nonsensical. But we can revisit it in 6 months.
How can Europe take over the war of Russia? How do they have anything to send to NATO or to Ukraine? Not to NATO, but to Ukraine.
They buy it from us. Hey, Trump's not going to cut us out of the money. We're going to sell them the weapons. It's just that we're not going to supply. We'll sell them the weapons, and they'll make their own. I mean, the Germans have this Taurus missile, and it's getting where drones are fairly easy to make. People make drones. I read the other day now that just hobbyists who have their own little drones, they're now weaponizing them. You can, if you're a drone hobbyist, you can now weaponize your drone. Now, as soon as the authorities find out the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, somebody will probably try to shut all that down, But for the moment, an American with a drone can weaponize it. The stuff's available. And so the Europeans won't have any trouble. And but Trump's will sell them the weapons. Uh, so that war, I don't think is going to end. You see, I think we discussed this before, Mike, and I think we should be winding this session down. Um, I've always criticized Putin for the way he conducts the war because it goes on forever, and the longer it goes on, the more it widens. You see, if he had quickly, like any general would have done, knocked Ukraine out, the war would have been over before we could get involved. But when you let it go on forever, we get involved. First a little bit, and then more, and then all the weapons we'll never send them, we sent them, and then we're doing the targeting for them, and we're programming the missiles that are fired off into Russia, and we more and more and more involved, and now the last constraint is taken off, no limit on the weapons and no limit on the range. So this is the consequence of Putin fighting a war that should never, no one in his right mind would ever have fought that way. Why was he doing it? There has to be some explanation. And my explanation at this time is that he wants to use the war to get peace negotiations about the war that he can turn into a great power agreement, a much broader settlement. He's not interested in settling the war. He's interested in settling the relationship between Russia and the West. He wants to be accepted, no sanctions.
You there?
Yeah,
Okay. I don't know what happened there, but go ahead.
I don't know either. The digital revolution works less and less every day.
It's our whole system. I know we're getting to the end here, but our whole, really, if you think about our system, good timing this happened. Everything you're supposed to be automating, making things easier, but everything you have to do nowadays is more hassle.
It's more hassle.
Everything.
It took me 5 hours just to report that somebody had hit my rear bumper while I was parked in public shopping, Publix parking lot, and I was inside shopping. And somebody hit the bumper. The bumpers are so flimsy, they just fall apart. And it took 5 hours just to report it online. You can't call them up on the phone. The thing you used to do in 3 minutes, now it's 5 hours. But to finish my point, I know what was my point. Oh yeah, I think Putin has let this war go on, hoping eventually there's peace negotiations, and then he can use those peace negotiations to get a broader agreement. And so his goal is not to end the war, it's to end the standoff between Russia and the West. And it's not going to work. He's not going to get it. But I think that's what he's trying to do. You see, to get a great power agreement is a much greater accomplishment than to win a little war somewhere. And so that's what I think he wants. He wants his crowning achievement because he's approaching where he's going to step down to be, I ended the conflict between East and West. And I think that's really what's going on because you see, we've had so many complaints from Russian military that
Dropped you again. Why don't you finish your last sentence and then where can people find you? And we'll end
Okay,
it.
well, you see a lot of complaints from the troops themselves. They feel like they're held back and they're taking casualties they would not take if they were actually in an offensive. So what they do is some tiny little village. It's got 400 people. They go and they fight over that for 2 or 3 months. Well, what for? A real general would just drop all the troops behind the lines of the Ukrainians, and they'd be trapped between two Russian lines, and the war would be over. It would have taken Napoleon 5 minutes to end that war. Or Robert E. Lee, he would have ended it in 5 minutes. Stonewall Jackson, you know, or Patton would have ended it in 3 minutes. And nobody fights wars that way unless they got some other purpose. And that's my explanation for the purpose. I may be totally wrong, but I haven't heard anybody else's explanation, you know. So I think we better get off. They don't like what we're saying.
No, where can people find you, Doctor?
Well, on the website, paulcraigroberts.org. And they find me on your show and on Nima's show and Larry Soprano's show and just about everywhere, really. And I'm hopeful. There's so many people like you and Nima and Larry and making efforts to get information out. If we don't learn what's really going on, we can't do anything about it.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
and you're performing a very important function, trying to help people learn what's really going on, or may really be going. To think, don't just accept the narrative they give you. You don't accept the narrative. If you accepted the narrative, you wouldn't have this program you've got.
No. Doctor, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I look forward to more conversations ahead.
Yeah, me too, Mike. Goodbye
Mic
for
drop.
now.
Mic drop.